We're going to talk about Tracie Morris's performance piece slash poem, Chain Gang. Why don't we just listen to it? It's obviously a reformation of the Sam Cooke song, which we'll talk about. So here's Tracie Morris doing Chain Gang.
That's the sound of the man working on a chain gang. Don't you know that's the sound of the man working on a chain gang? That's the sound of the man working on a chain gang. Don't you know that's the sound of the man working on a working it. That's the sound of the man working on a working it. Working at the that's a sound working on the man, sound of the man, sound of the man, sound of the man working on the same sound, same, don't
Wow, okay. What did we hear?
We heard the sound of the chain gang.
Yeah, we really heard the sound of the Chain Gang. Let's talk about Sam Cooke's piece. Song released in July of 1960, one of his most successful singles. Peaked at number 2 on the Billboard Hot 100. This is not just R&B Billboard, but the all genres. Let's talk about the Sam Cooke version. Willie, any thoughts on it?
There's a sort of a background pervasive sort of a sound, like a
Well, you did that well.
Thank you. So there's that sort of non-linguistic utterance in the background, and then a very melodic and regular pop melody or R&B melody on top.
So Sam Cooke and his brother Charles were driving through the South on a tour. They saw a chain gang. We'll talk about what a chain gang was, somewhat is. That's troubling. Felt sorry for them, to say the least, and then gave them things, gave them cartons of cigarettes and so forth, and then Sam wrote the piece. That's the sound of the men working on a chain gang. What's a chain gang? What was a chain gang?
Inmates who are forced to do physical labor.
Inmates, prisoners forced to perform physically challenging tasks, partly to get the work done free, right? Roads and things, and partly as punishment, right? And it's a practice that was almost completely gone by 1955. There were still chain gangs in Georgia, and it must have been in Georgia where Sam Cooke and his brother found the chain gang in leading up to 1960. So I mean, it's obvious that chain gangs are a terrible way to create discipline and punishment.
And weren't they called chain gangs because they were literally chained together
Oh, yeah.
at the ankle?
They were called chain gangs because they were chained together. Chain gang brings up what kind of thoughts, what kind of connotation, culturally, politically, racially, and so forth.
Slavery.
Certainly,
Yeah,
chain
for sure.
slavery, yeah.
Just the whole chaining. I mean,
And we know from our other discussions about Tracie Morris that she's interested in the Middle Passage, for instance. So her piece, Africa, is really about how you narrate that. And she thought then, and she thinks now about chain gang, that she's doing an American art. So anyway, okay, so back to what she's doing with Sam Cooke. Let's say a little more about Go ahead, Lil.
She starts with, I'm having trouble remembering now if it's the actual complete phrase, that's the sound of the man working on the chain gang.
I think
but
she does,
I think
yeah.
she does, and so she starts there, and then rather than use that as the basis to construct a beautiful rhythmic, verse, chorus, verse type of song, she deconstructs it from there, which, like, to say the least, she deconstructs it from there.
So
It
let's
becomes
talk
this,
about the
like-
sound of the deconstruction.
Well,
What
it becomes
happens?
this like intensely anti-rhythmic that she
Well,
seems
it's very
to,
rhythmic, but
she seems to kind of corrupt her own sound as she makes it.
Mm-hmm.
That there's this gradual invasion of breathiness that gives this kind of frenetic, manic quality to it that slowly just unravels the kind of semantic sense of this simple
we do have
phrase.
some semantic sense, though. What do we hear?
That's the sound.
We hear that's the sound, but there's something else.
At the end, she starts repeating same sound,
Same
man,
sound, same sound,
same
same
chain,
sound.
same man, same
So
chain.
what about same sound? It's almost Steinian here. Same sound, same sound. What does same sound say in connection with Sam Cooke's version of Chain Gang?
It isn't the same sound of the chain gang. That she's repeating same sound, same sound, same sound until the sort of the very words the same sound lose their meaning. you
Right.
know, both as sort
And
of
that is, remember Stein's interest in similarity and likeness and repetition. Stein believed that it wasn't through realistic, descriptive, denotative, or narrative language that we are going to describe the world. Tracie Morris subscribes to that modernist idea that if you really want to put the chain gang in words, you've got to do something different. Let's say again what that different thing is. Molly, start us off. What is one thing you have to do that's different?
Well, I think one thing that she does is actually recreate the sound. And the sound is not this smooth, crooning voice. It's this kind of beatboxing, rhythmic, jarring quality.
She's trying to get back to use Baraka's phrase, how you sound. She's trying to get to the bottom of that sound. And at the bottom of that sound is what? We're not really good at talking about sound, but let's try it.
But it's breath, right? It's
Breath
like the,
is one thing.
The like struggle, breath, and
Effort.
physical labor.
Struggle. The struggle of the voice. Keep going.
It's friction.
Friction. Ch, ch, ch. Right?
I like that the poem that as she performs it is really like I can hear like the stress on like her vocal cords. Like it's almost like a physically challenging poem to hear and for her to perform. That kind of mimics that the struggle of what
It
they're actually doing.
replicates it.
Like what Emily was saying before, she was saying how like what's difficult about it is like the physical labor that's so at odds with the melodiousness of Sam Cooke's version.
Yes.
That the struggle that you hear like in
Yes.
her vocal cords
Yes.
replicates that physicality.
As you, in particular, have always said in ModPo, we have to do the work, right? If
Well, she's
a
doing-
group of
she's
prisoners
doing the
chained
work.
together to be made to perform physically challenging work as a form of punishment, the best way to do honor to it is to do physically challenging work in order to replicate the sound of the chain gang. If art is supposed to reproduce either language or sound or visuality of reality, then reproduce that, and that's what she does. I keep thinking of Hemingway on the Key of Smyrna, looking across the bay at, I looked it up, it wasn't 100,000 people on the Key. It turned out, I looked it up last night, it was 400,000 people smushed by the Turks, Greeks and Armenians, and Hemingway needed to find a language, in this case it was Steinian modernism, to try to stutter his way through how you describe the women with their dead babies. They had dead babies, the dead babies were there, we saw the dead babies, we heard the women screaming about the dead babies were there for 6 days. Trying again and again, same sound, same sound, same sound. Keep going, what else?
I guess also.
This is really good, isn't it? I mean, right? I mean, Tracie Morris is really good. I don't think she's rebuking Sam Cooke.
No, not at all. And I
Right?
think she's actually in dialogue with that history of black music in America. Totally. And I think that there's this point to be made about the sound of a laboring black body, whether it's forced labor or it's Sam Cooke who needs to make himself sort of legible by a white audience and consumable by a white audience,
Right.
and sort of like deracialize himself. I mean, there's this kind of bondage that's happening, not at all to, obviously I don't want to equate slavery and forced labor with, writing a crossover hit, but I think that there is that point to be made, right, about the sound of men working, black men working, or the sound of bodies working.
We encountered this very topic when we dealt with Count E. Cullen's poem, the Sisyphean poem, where he's doomed to do this kind of work, right? And though it is not analogous to the Middle Passage, or it's not like the Middle Passage, it is analogous to it in the sense that he has to commit this kind of work. And I think Tracie is saying, yes, the Cullen-like, formerly conservative, Sam Cooke's not conservative, but formerly conservative move that Sam Cooke made, which is analogous to the Cullen move. Tracie Morris comes later and says, okay, now I've been liberated, that I have to do the crossover. Spoken word has an audience, people will hear me, etc. Lily, you were going to say something.
I think though that she's countering, Tracie Morris isn't, her mode of trying to represent I guess represent the trauma of the chain gang isn't so much to say I am doing that the way that Sam Cooke is saying I am doing that.
Yeah.
It's to say that it's to comment on and build on other previous representations and sort of highlight as almost a corrective rather than, like, it's not Tracie Morris's version of chain gang that's better. It's like a version that needs Sam Cooke's version to be able to comment on and make a more complete picture, because what she's saying isn't just about how horrible a chain gang is, it's how horrible a chain gang is and how horrible is the way it's been represented in the past as something lighthearted. So it's both those things.
Well, we still got to give props to Sam Cooke because it's a really sad song. It's depressing and bleak, but the only way to get that to an audience was to hoo-ha it and to put it in a R&B catchy context. So
Or even that makes it more effective, right?
yeah, I think it's like incident in that way.
Feel good melody.
Yeah.
And just going off of that point, I think something that is so powerful in Tracie Morris's Chain Gang is that you begin, and at first it's just sonically it sounds so difficult and it's so cool that, at least when I was listening, I was just like, wow, this is amazing. But as
The actual dexterity and performativity.
But as she goes on, it becomes, as Anna was saying, it sounds painful and uncomfortable, and it's kind of like that feeling that, like, when someone scratches their nails against a chalkboard or something, you're just like, you feel it. And I just think that this performance, like, just totally, like, just sparks your mirror neurons, like, up the wazoo in a way that, like, is really important and is really essential, because it makes it like almost physically uncomfortable to listen to. And I think that we need that physical discomfort, and I think that puts us in a place in a really effective way, and that maybe Sam Cooke didn't have the privilege at the time of doing.
We have to learn to hear dissonance, and I think what Tracie Morris teaches us so well is to hear that dissonance, to hear not harmony, not sweetness. Sam Cooke goes part of the way by having the be code to people who understood how painful that is, and as they pointed out, how sad it is, but also those who would simply want to dance to the beat would be able to do it. There's a doubleness there. And I think Tracie Morris is one of those chapter 9.3 poets who's focused on how you sound. Being, in fact, that's the sound of that piece, Chain Gang, is in fact its content, right? And if you want to reproduce, which fortunately is a historical thing, chain gangs, if you want to reproduce that to listeners, to people who attend readings, to young people who fall in love with Tracie Morris's amazing dexterity, vocal dexterity, you wind up teaching them by reproducing the sound of it. They hear the how of it and they get it. If someone described a chain gang in denotative ways, it might not have the same effect.